You can talk about the Iran war.
I've seen it mentioned that if Israel does well with this, and obviously Iran being the successor to Persia, will we have another holiday? And if there's a pastry that will be identified, will it be Khomeini Tashin?
So, welcome everybody to the Wednesday class that shall not be named, talking about the future of food in Jewish history if Israel dethrones the Ayatollah. That is not the topic of conversation, but I want people to know that David and Michael and I are probably the most knowledgeable people about this Iran-Israel war in the world today, and that we really could put a lot of damage to either country if we reveal the knowledge we know. So that's be clear that we are revealing it to Israel. I mean, most of Israel's strikes are based on information from David, Michael, and me. But I think people already knew that. That's not. It's like an open secret. So we wish everybody the best. Again, our prayers go out to Israel and all those. I think most of us understand the difficulties that we see in the issues with Gaza and the poor people who are there, but I think most of us understand that Iran is a very dangerous enemy, and Israel has been attacked by them plenty through the years, so we'll see how that goes. But today we're not talking about that. We're going to continue our discussion a little bit on modern Jewish women who have impacted the world, and we'll invite people. We only have a couple people here on Zoom today, so welcome to Michael and David. I think most of the other people are out of town or have just decided they don't like me. So, but you guys can figure that out for yourself. So welcome to Michael and David. Getting my view has been changed on here. I'm trying to figure out how to set up my thing, but it's not working. Oh well. So we'll talk before we begin. We talked about several women last week, including couple of my favorites, Gilda Radner, and of course Joan Rivers, comedians. We talked about a few others, Abigail Minus, who we consider modern, even though was in the 1800s, probably the most prominent person from our congregational history. Michael or David, did you have anybody you'd like to bring up before we go to the next ones? All right, I'll take that as a no.
I guess if we're looking broadly and sweeping in the converts, there's always the Marilyn Monroe.
Yes, that's a good point. We could always talk about Marilyn Monroe. She did go through conversion. Yes, she was Jewish, as Jewish as anybody else. And I can look that up right now. And go a little bit over if we want to do actresses, because she certainly is one of the most famous actresses of all time for many reasons. And she died. She was really young. She was only 36 when she died. And I know, what's his name? Clark Gable. A lot of people blame her for his death because she gave a really tough time for her last movie. Her last movie, Clark Gable's, The Misfits. And so, but we can talk about her. And of course, dating Joe DiMaggio and the president, and being one of my mom's favorite actresses as well. So, but I don't know if she was a famous actress, but she was kind of like almost more famous for what she did off the screen, kind of like some of the other actresses today, kind of setting that precedent of being famous. Did she do that in movies? But I wanted to talk about somebody else first. And one of my favorite, it was Agnes Coletti. Did we talk about her last time? I think I mentioned I was going to talk about her.
Yeah.
So Agnes Coletti is one of the most incredible women of all time. If you don't know who she is, she just died this year. She was the oldest person ever oldest gold medalist or medalist.
Oh, the gymnast.
Yeah.
The Hungarian gymnast. You did talk about her.
Okay, I mentioned her, but I don't think I went through all the specifics. Yeah. So she was an incredible person. So when I say she's not the oldest person ever to win a medal, She's the oldest person who won a medal to ever live. I mean, she lived 103. That's older than any other Olympic medalist of all time. She's second on the Jewish list of Olympic medals to Mark Spitz. She won 5 gold medals, 3 silver, and 2 bronze. So 10 medals altogether, including a silver for all around. But that is not really just why she is so remarkable. The story is quite incredible because she won her first gold medal in 1952 when she was 31. And most gymnasts are finished by 1920. And then she won her last medal in the 56 Olympics when she was 35. So that is incredible. So why did she wait so long to win her medals? That's always, what did she, so the answer is obvious. Won World War II, but she didn't participate in 48 either, which was the first Olympics. So let's go over a little bit about Agnes Kaleti. Born in Hungary, was a trained gymnast in the Hungarian national championship, champion by 16. And I forgot her original name. Look that her original name was, what was it? I forgot her original. Her original name was Klein. She had a Klein, but she changed it because it sounded too Jewish. So she was the top gymnast in Hungary with the 1940 Olympics coming, but of course we know what happened. World War II, 40 and 44 games were canceled. She was kicked out of her gymnast club for being Jewish. She married a man, another Jewish guy, another guy to help save her. She survived the war by buying papers and pretending she was Christian and working in a small village where nobody knew she was. She worked as a maid in a village with fake papers. And her parents were saved by not Raoul Wallenberg, but somebody very similar, Karl Lutz. But everybody else died. I think her parents survived and she survived. She also was in Budapest when the Soviets came in. And so she was one of the people who was given the job of taking bodies and putting them in graves during the Soviet, when the Soviets took over. So you figure after the war, she became a professional cellist and then started gymnastics training again. But she missed 1940 and 1944 because of the war. And then she missed 1948 because she was injured. And so basically you would probably assume she would retire. She had already won a world championship, but then she continued. And in 1952, at the age of 31, which I think she was easily the oldest gymnast ever to win a medal, especially she won several medals, including a gold. And then she won in the World Championships. And she came back in the 56 Olympics at 35 and won 6 medals. And really established herself as somebody truly remarkable. And I think she's still the oldest female gymnast to ever win a medal and ever win a gold as well. Excuse me for a second, guys.
Do you know anybody who can use these?
Probably, yeah, plenty of kids. So, Soviet Union then invades Hungary in 1956. When do they invade Hungary? During the Olympics. So they invade Hungary while she's competing in the Olympics in Australia. and asked for political asylum. So if she had been in the country, she would have been, of course, stuck under Soviet control, but she was just coincidentally, so I don't think she was the only, I think many of the Olympians stayed. And then she became the coach for the Australian Olympic gymnast team. And then she really soon after that immigrated to Israel and competed in the Maccabee Games and then lived and became a phys ed teacher at one of the universities in Israel and lived in Israel the rest of her life. So she coached obviously for Israel. I think she coached her national team, but really incredible that this gymnast who missed 3 Olympics. Think about the Olympians who missed the 1980 Olympics because we didn't go. None of the gymnasts, I think, came back for the 84 one because they were too old.
Yeah.
And yet she missed 3 Olympics. She lived for years in hiding as a maid. Then she lived as somebody who was burying the bodies forced by the Soviet Union. And then she, while she was participating in the Olympics, her country was taken over. And all her stuff, of course, everything she owned was in Hungary. So she just stayed with whatever little she had and made a life for a year or two in Australia, and then, of course, went to Israel. So really a phenomenal person. You can look her up online. She almost won the all-around gold at 35. So at 35, she won a silver in the all-around, which is unbelievable. I mean, most of the time, those girls at that point, really until recent last few years, the girls winning the all around were like 15 years old. And nobody, I think, ever, till maybe the 90s or 2000s, won 2 in a row. So you think about Nadia Comaneci, who was one of the most famous. She won in 76, but in 80, she still had a decent 1980 Olympics, but was done. But Agnes Coletti, all the way till 35, and then she continued, I think, and did a couple world championships afterwards. And the guy she married to, she was only married for a few years. It was just try to escape the Nazis. So that's Agnes Coletti, another one of my favorites. Very interesting, not very well known. I wanted to make sure we talk about her because she died this year at 103. That is, and not only that, a lot of gymnasts die a little bit younger because of what it does to their bodies. So really quite incredible. So that was Agnes Coletti. We're going to talk about a couple others now, and some of them you may have heard of, some of them you may not have. I don't know if you've ever heard of Bella Abzug. I think we spoke about her previously. She was a U.S. representative in New York. She was a member of the House in New York. And so we'll talk a little bit about her as I take this note.
I got it sometime at the end of last week, so I just.
Okay, we probably should start one.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about Bella Abzug. Okay, she was a lawyer, politician. You may know her as a social activist, but what she really was known as a leader in the women's movement in the 70s. Along with Gloria Steinem, who somebody else will talk about, and Betty Friedan, who we may talk about as well. So we can talk about these 3 women who really had such an impact. So if we look at history from a wide angle perspective, the civil rights movement was the 60s, gay rights movement was the 80s, but the 70s would be the decade for women's rights. And we're going to talk about some women who really helped create a better world. So let's talk about Bella. Have you guys heard of her, by the way?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So she was born Bella Savitsky. So if you didn't know, she was Jewish. Now you know for sure.
She was related to the Queen.
Oh, really?
Well, did you ever see her collection of hats?
That's one of the things she was
That
famous
that was
for.
her trademark.
Yeah,
These
Yeah.
big hats.
Yeah.
Just a joke. Okay,
Um,
sorry about that.
no,
No.
I think it's great that because you got to remember, for me, this is history. I was not paying attention in my diapers to what the great women of the 70s were doing. But for you guys, you lived through it because you're a little bit, not that much older, but enough older that you
Yes.
remember the 70s and what they went through. So these people are all just history book people for me. So she's born in 1920. Parents were, of course, Russian immigrants, as is so often the case. And she, as many of the other women who would be on this list, went to services and saw the separation for women and men. And it was not something that she enjoyed, to say the least. So this is one of the things that influenced her. And really, one of the other differences between her and her others is she went to synagogue all the time because she had no brothers, and her dad wanted her to have somebody to go to synagogue with. So she'd have to walk to synagogue when she was a kid with her dad, and I can only imagine he walks to the synagogue, and then she goes up to the women's section, and she's there by herself, and then afterwards, 3 or 4 hours later, she sees him again. And so that was probably a little daunting. So she graduated as class president. She was, very accomplished in many, many ways. And she went to Hunter College, CCNY, and of course, JTS. So, and was also very prominent at all these places, president and all these things, and then went to Columbia Law School in 1944. So just remember, this is a woman who is studying at JTS, not to be a rabbi, but the Jewish Theological Seminary, and she goes to Columbia Law School as a woman. So again, there were women who went to law school, but it was rare, and it was only really, you had to be the best of the best. They probably didn't have any mediocre female law students back then. I am sure there was also a very limited number of women who were allowed, especially into such a prestigious school. So she becomes a lawyer at a prominent firm, and right away she's dealing with the rights of people who don't have them. Even coming to the South and dealing with the issues of race here. She dealt a lot with the tenants' rights and labor rights, and helped organize strikes for women in various ways, advocated for the ERA and protested Vietnam. So she was very prominent in so many ways in the 60s as a lawyer. And then in 1970, she ran for election, which, again, she's not the first woman to be a member of Congress by any stretch of the imagination, but it's still quite unique to have women in Congress this early. And she beat a long-term incumbent, and she became a representative in New York. I don't understand New York, like where she was representative, because I don't know, but she was someplace in New York. I'm sure New York has a bunch of different representatives. It's so big. But do anybody know what district or whatever? Anybody know about this?
Well, she was certainly had her seat was in Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn, okay.
I know that, but which district I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what all these things are.
I'm sure it wasn't Williamsburg.
Okay, Manhattan's West Side, is that Brooklyn?
No.
Okay.
Oh,
No.
no. But I don't think she was the West Side. That was what's his name, Ryan. Maybe not. God, you're testing my memory, and I'm finding that it's lacking.
Somebody named Farbstein. And anyway, she won an election, and I saw this happen in Texas, and then she didn't lose the next election. The very next year, a year later, the area was redistricted, and she lost her seat. And so then she ran for another district and won. So, and I saw this happen in Texas. It was really, so as a member of Congress for 6 years, she, of course, was very well known for supporting so many, yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I just gave you bad information. And you were right. She was a representative on the Manhattan's West Side, and it was redistricted. But so, and then later, which makes a lot of sense to me, she was redistricted again, and some of her district included the Bronx. So
Okay.
and then it's pretty common. Yeah.
Well, she was very prominent in so many ways. It's rare that a short-term Congress person will have such a impressive resume, but she worked with the President of the United States. She worked with issues with Vietnam, with women's rights, obviously, which became famous for being such a Zionist. Again, already challenging the UN with all the resolutions against Israel. Thank goodness they've stopped resolutions against Israel. Oh, wait, no, they haven't. But they have stopped resolutions against every other country. Well, no, I'm sorry, they haven't stopped resolutions against every other country in the world. They never gave them. They only give resolutions to one country, and it's so ironic that so many people in America. I was just talking to somebody who's like, well, this is what the UN says. And I was talking about, well, if the UN's always said it, then it must be true. They have such a reputation. So she finished her term, and then she ran for Senate, which she lost. But I think it was a very close race. But she served in various capacities, including U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. I'm sure had the same issues that so many other people had as Jews with the United Nations. So, yes, famous for her hats. I think she was also very famous for her hats because I think Congress banned the hats after a while. Like they banned her having her hats. So I don't know if I think she eventually got it back, but they tried to keep her from her hats for whatever reason. I do not know, but that is just, pretty funny. So, but also as a human being, I think she was a very forward one. She was not shy, to say the least. Very aggressive, not a demure person. So she said what she thought all the time, and it got her in trouble some of the time, I assume, because she was known as being very, not boisterous, but to the point. How's that? So there was a lot. I mean, if you read about her, she did all these interesting things. She is, one of Time Magazine's most important women of the 20th century type things. So really essential for us to know. Not as famous as Gloria Steinem, which we'll talk about now, but really quite impressive. And you guys lived through it, which is kind of cool because I did not. Gloria Steinem, obviously I heard of probably in the 70s and 80s, but not as a freedom fighter, but because she was part of a magazine. That's all I knew. She did magazines. So when I was growing up, I had no idea who she was or how influential. So if you're going to talk about women's rights in this country, you can go all the way back to Susan B. Anthony. But if you're talking about women's rights in the 20th century, probably many people will first go to Gloria Steinem. That's how much she is linked with the women's movement and how much she's considered such a proponent, not always liked, vilified often, but her name is more recognizable than probably any other woman with the women's movement. Can you guys think of anybody else who is more recognizable than her with the women's movement? I mean,
I mean, I think she was very recognizable. I remember, in Michigan, she was constantly in the news.
yeah,
Uh, there was Ruth Bader Ginsburg was more behind the scenes in the
right.
quiet.
Until
Uh,
recent, her later years, she became
Over
more.
later years, Betty Friedan was very, very much
Yeah,
out there in the news as
Yeah.
well.
Emma Goldman,
Uh,
Yeah.
maybe.
Betty Friedan was more, in a sense, to me, and you can disagree, David, and you'd probably be right, but I think she was more the intellectual
Right.
leader,
yes,
whereas Gloria Steinem was more the social leader, the political leader, the in
She
your
was the one,
face leader.
face. She was the
but and I
face.
think they all fit together
That's the word.
because
That's the word.
obviously legal and the intellectual side was important,
Yeah.
but I think Gloria Steinem being out there, being a
Yeah.
celebrity, um, in with the magazine, it sort of she was out there
Right.
whether it was fashion or women in jobs or
Yeah.
whatever, was a pretty important person, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe Gertrude Wild might be up there, but that's much earlier. I think, the 70s is really when it came to fruition and started. So Gertrude Wild would be kind of like a forebearer of these people, but she was, obviously lived during that time. She died in 1960s, 70s. But she was really much, so that might be somebody as well who would be. But let's talk about, who are we talking about? Gertrude Stein. No, we're talking about
Gloria Steinem.
Gloria Steinem. Thank you. Thank you. So many. So Gloria Steinem. Let's go over Gloria Steinem, who I think is the most famous women's rights leader of the 20th century, maybe of all time. Funny enough, many of the great women's rights activists in our country have been Jewish. That's quite a feat if you think about it. There's always been limits. I mean, America's been great, but there has been some limit to men. There's to Jews. There's always been limits to women. So let's go Steinem, born in Ohio, Toledo of all places. And her mother was actually not Jewish, but she was raised Jewish. And her parents were just right, were really supportive of what she did because her grandmother had been a very big proponent of suffrage, women's suffrage. So, she had gone around with her grandmother. So eventually she would, sorry, did you have something you want to say? So she would become a proponent in so many ways of so many things. She would become a journalist and, of course, become a columnist for New York Magazine. And she founded Miss, which, of course, became a very prominent one. She was part of the Women's Caucus. She was everywhere. As a journalist, she also, she was a journalist for Esquire, and she also commented on Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, which made her famous. She worked for so many different prominent magazines that she even became she tried everything. And I think Minnie famously I think she was a Playboy bunny for a while. That's one of the things that made her really famous, that she became a Playboy bunny, but was writing articles on being a bunny. And she did it to really publicize the exploitation of women and what they were doing. But of course, because she did it, it lessened her reputation as a journalist, even though she always said she was really proud. She became famous for interviewing people because she interviewed. She became famous for speaking out for abortion rights because she had an abortion. And she worked with television producers to produce women's shows and that she became really close with other women who were also leading the cause, like presidential wives like Carter, Betty Ford, and Lady Bird Johnson, who we all know were very much proponents of women's rights. She wrote essays all over the place for the New York Times, for Cosmopolitan, for The Guardian, just nonstop. She was very prolific in what she wrote. And again, just throughout her career, which lasted a very long time, I think she wasn't that old when she died, probably 70, but the entire time that she was adult, she spent promoting various causes, mostly women's rights. So again, another person who went to college, who was Jewish, and did very well. As we all know, usually women who were allowed to go to college did very well. She did everything from working in India for 2 years to meeting Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, so this was a woman at a very young age who was already meeting with some of the most prominent people in the world and already really starting to promote women's rights. And they call it the second wave, I guess. That's what she called it, the wave of the 70s, but really was the lead proponent. So a lot of the changes that have happened in the world have happened because of her. And you guys got to see it firsthand. Did you guys, was she in the news all the time in the 70s? I mean, in the 80s, she still was a little bit, but I mean, she still was, but not like the 60s, 70s.
I mean, she would appear on the talk shows. She wrote a lot. She was in the news a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the really things I remember about her is when Bill Clinton had all those issues with Monica Lewinsky, she was actually saying it wasn't such a big deal. So that was one of the other things. She was never afraid to speak her mind, even if people didn't agree with her, or even if it went against what some thought she should be saying. So this is a woman who, she was arrested. She had a woman's Seder. I think it may have been the first only woman's Seder, which became a big deal. So she was a big advocate against Clarence Thomas because of the harassment case. She supported, very famous for supporting Anita Hill. As we remember, I say that because, of course, Clarence Thomas is from our area. So again, she was in the news pretty much almost to the day she died, and then continues to be afterwards. So if she died recently, she had to be older than 70 because she didn't die that long ago. She just died recently, didn't she?
Well, she's in her 90s. That's,
I think she's
She's still living, isn't she?
yeah.
Yeah.
She's still living.
Yeah.
No, she died. No, her dad. No, she's still living, right?
Yeah.
My bad. Yeah, I got confused with.
Yeah, she was born March 25th, 1934. She's 91 years old.
Yeah, she's still living.
Yeah.
My bad. Sorry, Gloria Steinem.
Yeah.
I was thinking of somebody else, but yeah, she's still, because she was. I saw her speaking just a few years ago on some program. So, but again, this, like we mentioned with Bella, someone, I don't think she was as aggressive, but ready to speak her rights, but also was a fashion plate. I mean, this was not a woman who was saying women shouldn't be fashionable. Either was Bella Abzug. They both were very fashionable. So they tried to do it within instead of from without, She was not saying that women shouldn't be pretty and shouldn't dress up nicely and do their thing. She was like, women should be able to do what they want. And if they want to dress nicely and be a fashion plate, that's kind of so if you look at anytime, she's always very fashionable. She didn't have hats though, but she had, the long hair. And so our hats off well, hats off mostly to Bella, but our hats off to Gloria Steinem as well for all she did. But let's go to Gertrude Wild since we're on the subject, because I just brought her up because she's almost as famous. She is probably the preeminent social, I guess, advocate from the early 20th century. So she was born in the she was born post Civil War and in North Carolina, so where it was really affecting. And so her parents obviously are not Russian immigrants because it's before the Russian immigration. So they're either German Jews or they're German Jews. I don't know if they came over or if their parents came over, but obviously she has to be pretty much German origin if she's lived in before 1881. And her parents were very instrumental in founding a synagogue in North Carolina, and she grew up there and really became someone to speak about. I mean, she grew up in North Carolina, but she went to Smith College, as so many of these other great leaders did, and she saw what other women had done to really help with supporting the cause of women. And so that's what she decided to do for the rest of her life. And her mother had been a very big proponent of women's rights as well. And so she had been supporting her mother's work. But then in her early 20s, she really, I don't know if she knew this beforehand or realized it in her early 20s, that she couldn't vote, that women couldn't vote. And so in the early 1900s, started to really promote the idea that women should have the right to vote. And wrote about it, but she was also really someone who worked hard to start the suffrage movement. And so not the head of the suffrage movement, but a very prominent person in it. And so she joined the National American Women's Suffrage Association, which of course we know is going to eventually do something remarkable. She founded her own suffrage organization in North Carolina and was very involved in 1919 and 1920 with pressing Congress and the Senate and the President with the 19th Amendment. And so that's what they all became most famous for, was the idea that, and I'll read it, I don't have the 19th Amendment here, but anyway, to basically prohibit governments from denying women to vote. And at that time, she was basically the leader of the North Carolina suffrage movement, which was very prominent. And again, they won, but there was some irony about it. I forgot. I think something like it wasn't until after her death that North Carolina supported the 19th Amendment, something like that. Have you ever heard that? Something like when North Carolina never officially supported the 19th Amendment until after her death. And in honor of her, they did it or something like that. But I'll have to look that up. But she also fought for other issues. So for women's rights in other areas, like protecting pensions for women, especially if their husband died. And I think she used this knowledge to become what she became, this is what she did on the side. But for the most part, she was a social worker as well. So that's what she did for her livelihood, although she didn't have to. So she supported birth control famously. She fought against poverty. She fought against longer working hours. She fought for African American rights, and this is not in the 1960s, the 1930s and 20s. And of course, she's living in North Carolina, so we know how that would not have been popular. And she was also really, she's taught Sunday school for years. And through different Jewish organizations, that's how she kind of met a lot of women to kind of find this connection. And she also never married. She wanted to, I don't know if she wanted to, but she kind of endorsed the idea that she did not want to get married. And so she never did, which I think is in itself pretty remarkable, because women often had their identities associated with who they married, and she didn't want that. Or, I mean, she's publicly said that, who knew what she really wanted, but that's, but she really wanted women to be treated well in the Jewish world, whether they were Orthodox or liberal. And it's really, again, kind of like Gloria Steinem, that she did a little bit of everything. She wasn't as prolific a writer, but she was doing it in what we call the South in North Carolina, supporting women's suffrage, supporting African rights, supporting women's pensions, working with the poor. So that's why her name is pretty well known. And she also donated a lot of her family's money to helping these causes. And I'm looking how old she lived to. She lived to 90 something as well. So it's amazing, because she really was mostly, although she did other things, but really associated with North Carolina. So it's hard to be famous when you're from North Carolina, working with national groups. Of course, my favorite is Harry Golden, if you've ever read any of his stuff. But really amazing stuff. So that's a little bit of Gertrude Weil. And I don't know if did you guys hear of her as well? Or is she not as well known?
I didn't know about her.
Yeah, she's pretty well known, but not as well known. So, but we'll talk about a few other people before we conclude. So, who are some people who've really affected the world recently in the modern world? And of course, we'll just mention Sheryl Sandberg. I mentioned her because we're almost exactly the same age, and I would say she's maybe a little bit more successful than me, slightly.
Financially.
By reputation. That's right. So she, of course, became the COO of Facebook, or Meta, and just an incredibly important woman on the world stage, and really promoted women becoming leaders in business and leaders in the internet world, and promoting equality for women and various other things she's promoting. And of course, born the same year as me, and I have done almost nothing compared to her. But I'm not bashing me, because I'm not good enough to be like her. But but so certainly somebody to think about who is still 56 now. So she's, I'm in my prime. I don't know if she is, but actually I never had a prime. But incredible woman. So she's somebody to think about. Other people who I like to think about in terms of prominent Jewish women: Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we can talk about. I think, did we already talked about her?
Yeah.
Hannah Senesh, of course, who was the Israeli who died, was tortured in World War II. She made her way to Israel from Hungary, then volunteered to serve in the military, and was captured while parachuting behind lines.
Yeah.
And even while she was tortured, never gave up any information. Bobby Rosenfeld, another great Olympian, probably the greatest Jewish Olympian in track and field, as she dominated track and field in the 20s. So maybe the greatest Jewish women athlete. There's been others, but she certainly might be there. She probably is, but it's hard to tell. How do you compare, different ones? Judith Resnick, second woman into space. Actually, maybe the second American woman. Anyway,
First American.
second, yeah, there was
Sally Ride.
Sally Ride was the first. I'm not sure if there's any Russians who were ahead of her.
Well, in the 1950s, they sent a Russian woman up.
But
Very early in the
right,
space program.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she's the first Jewish woman.
Yeah.
But and again, by the time she went into space, and this is in the 80s, astronauts were not just people they stuck, fighter pilots who they stuck on the ship. She was an engineer, and that's who they sent. So, but of course, she died with Challenger, and that was, as we know, so unfortunate. So, anybody else you guys want to mention? All right, I'll mention a couple more then. Okay. Barbara Streisand is really, for me, a prominent woman, not because just she was an actress, but she really became an icon on a different level as a singer, as an actress, not a little bit as an activist, but more as a philanthropist, and also for being, I think she was an activist. I would say she was, but also for becoming such a powerhouse in the entertainment world, taking over her own career and really dictating what she became, and also one of the very first female directors of note. I think she was the first woman to be nominated for Best Director. She didn't win it, but again, what an icon, both as a musician and as an actress. And really, she's so good that they had entire sketches making fun of her on SNL. But I think she also became very prominent because she spoke out about women who don't have the same Hollywood look, still being able to be successful. Because obviously, if you see Barbara Streisand in Fanny Girl, she is really pretty, but she is a different kind of pretty than what all the other girls are, all the other women are, and really helped make it that other women who look different could be such an icon. I think we talked about Henrietta Zold last week, right? I think 2 weeks ago we did talk about Henrietta Zold, who obviously is beyond incredible for what she did, not only for Hadassah, but for what she did at JTS. And Gertrude Elion, one of the early women who won a Nobel Prize. She is one of the women who helped with the treatments for AIDS that she became so famous for. But she worked with many other diseases as well. And also, so she was a pharmaceutical chemist. So I think she won it for chemistry, but I'm not sure if she may have won it for medicine. So those are just some of the other women. There's so many more. We could mention, I just forgot her name. Oh my gosh. I have it here. Give me a second. Hedy Lamarr. I was going to say the woman who started Bar. Hedy Lamarr, probably our favorite Jewish actress. I don't know why she changed her name. Her original name was just perfect, Hedwig Eva Maria Kessler. I think that name made her very big in America. And she was a very controversial and famous actress in Czechoslovakia because she did a very erotic movie called Ecstasy, and which made her famous, but also in a different way. So she eventually left because obviously Jewish women were not in vogue, and she ended up meeting Louis B. Mayer. And she came to Hollywood and became a star, although she always portrayed the seductress, which was not always what she wanted. She had trouble moving on to other parts. Her parents, of course, were longtime Jews living in the Austrian Empire for a very long time. They were prominent, they were upper class, and so she took acting from a very early age and became an actress in movies very early. But the ecstasy is really what put her into the movie Ecstasy. It made her such an international star in so many different ways, often considered notorious because of it. And then, which is ironic because when she was a stage actress, I think she did a lot of much more variety. So when she married an older guy, she she did it against her parents' will, and that helped her in her life because the man she married had connections with the Nazi Party. And so that helped her survive and get out, I believe. But of course, eventually divorced. So she came to America. She works for Louis B. Mayer at MGM and was very strong-willed and really wanted to become the next Greta Garbo or Marlene Dietrich because she was so beautiful. However, she never made it that level. She was always famous, but not Greta Garbo, Hedy Lamarr, famous. So she's like, not B actress, probably a low A maybe. But she was in movies with Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable. And obviously we remember her from, didn't she play Delilah? I think she played Delilah in the famous Samson movie. And a lot of movies, but in real life she was really shy and kind of kept to herself. But why she is famous is very different. Not only was she Delilah to Samson, Victor Mature, but also she was brilliant. And that's why she became more famous later in terms of her effects, because she was a self-taught scientist. And I don't understand what she did, but she had several patents that helped with everything from traffic lights to carbonated drinks. And most famously, she created ideas that would eventually lead to radar. And so that was really why she became famous in other ways. She didn't always get money or credit for this, but really she was a self-taught scientist who, if she had been a man and done these things, would have been incredible, famous. But as a woman, obviously, it was a little harder. She liked, funny enough, like Greta Garbo, though, she went into seclusion after her career was over. And really, except for a few times here and there, was never heard from again, nationally. Unless you watched, of course, Blazing Saddles. Because in Blazing Saddles, they made fun of saying Hedley Lamarr was, anybody see the movie? They used her name as a joke in the movie, Hedley Lamarr. And so she sued them. I don't think she won, but she sued. And so again, she was an incredible woman as an artist, as an actress, and as a scientist. And again, a lot of her inventions didn't become famous till many years later. And some of them they never acknowledged that it was her patent they used to do things. So, and one of the ways so funny, her husband was an arms dealer, and that's how he knew Hitler. And so one of the ways she got to meet people was he would take her when he was making sales. So you're taking, this beautiful actress to help him make sales. I thought that was always pretty funny. Any thoughts or questions, or what do you guys remember about her? Because when did she die? She didn't die that long ago. She died in 2000. So, but she really had been out of the public life for 30 years. Any thoughts? So her invention, the radio guidance system, was used in World War II and later. So I don't understand what it was, but it was used for the torpedoes and for radio jamming. And then later for radar, which became more important. So, but I'm not technologically advanced to know any of what it did. All right, so the other thing is, even though she was Jewish, she kind of professed to be Christian because of the way, trying to leave Europe. So this will be the end of the class today. We are not going to have class next week because I have a doctor's appointment, and then it's just David and me now. Should we have class in July, or should I just cancel it for July? We'll see what people want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm up for it.
All right, so we'll have class in July, but not next week. So no class next week. And then we'll start thinking of some other topics that people are interested in. So today we talked about some famous Jewish women: Bella Abzug, Hedy Lamarr, Agnes Coletti, Gertrude Weil, Gloria Steinem. We also mentioned a few others, such as Betty Friedan and Hannah Senesh, Bobby Rosenfeld. We're talking about Barbara Streisand. So we talked about a lot. So, and who else did we talk about? One other person, Sheryl Sandberg. So I wish everyone all the best, and we will see you in 2 weeks on the Wednesday class that shall not be named. So have a great one, everybody. David, by the way,
Thanks.
Where are you right now?
I'm sorry?
Where are you right now?
I'm in London, but I should be in Savannah soon.
All right. I hope everything's going well. What's the news like there with, well, here's a separate topic with what's going on with Iran. Is it very anti-Israel, pro-Israel, supportive?
It's a split. Yeah, I mean, it's a serious split. So, we'll see how it shakes out. I mean, at times like this, the UK does like the umbrella of the United States. So, we'll see how it all works out.
I think if it was another country attacking Iran, they'd be very supportive.
Yes.
But if it's because it's Israel, but I'm sure behind the scenes, Europe is very happy that Iran is not getting a free hand. But so it's a little bit.
The German leader said, he was happy that Israel is doing the dirty work. So that is
I think that's the way, the behind the scenes dirty work. Yeah, they're doing what, and so, but again, agreeing with it behind the scenes and in front of the microphones can be very different. So,
yeah.
All right, buddy, you have a good one.
And see you soon.
I'll see you hopefully soon. When you come in, I'm taking you to lunch. I'm not saying
I'll
that
be
to
up for that.
everybody. I'm not saying that to everybody's watching. This is just for me. Although everybody else, I'll take the lunch too. Guys,
we'll do that. Okay, bye.
got a lot of good restaurants here. We may not be London, but we've got a lot of good restaurants.
Hey, no, I think it's better than London.
Wow, nice. England is not
it's
just
got a
but
it's got a history. I mean, London, like New York, there are lots of restaurants from different cuisines, but there's a base culture in Savannah that is very.
I do
makes a
remember
big
I was
difference.
one of the train stations in London, and I got some train station sushi, and it was delicious. So their train station sushi is good. That's all I remember.
Yeah.
I'm not a fish and chips guy. Well, all my best, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye to everybody
Bye.
else who was on. Bye to Gilbert and Michael and Genevieve and everybody watching on YouTube. All my best. Stay safe.